thank you very much for everyone joining us tonight. It's really good to have such a great amount of people join us. We've got a really good audience, and it's really, we really hope to deliver some really good content to you. There's going to be quite a lot involved in this evening, so we're really going to try and rattle through it, but there's going to be some really, really good information. So I will introduce a bit more about the evening and who's kind of talking. So first of all, we've got James Dunn, who you can also see on the screen at the minute. He's one of the technical directors at ADAS in the agriculture and land management team. He's got 30 years of experience in consultancy. He's also got a sort of sustainable beef and pig farm on the side as well. And then he will be presenting the sort of the main bulk of the presentation of this evening, which will have all the sort of real key information about agricultural transition, how your BPS is going to be affected, and potential ways to sort of adapt your business to hopefully be sustainable and resilient for the future. The second part of the evening will be a conversation with James Evans, who's an organic sheep and beef farmer from Shropshire, and he's practicing regenerative farming techniques. He's also remolded his business to become sort of resilient and sustainable for the future. So it'll be really interesting to have a conversation with him to see how and why and everything like that about his business and how he's adapted it. The last part of the evening will be a question and answer. And we've also got Richard Wordsworth, who's a senior advisor at the NFU, focusing on the basic payment scheme. He's got 19 years of experience at the NFU, as well as being a farm consultant before sort of working at the NFU. So all three of those chaps will be on the Q&A panel, so please ask any questions, which leads me on to a bit of housekeeping. So what we're going to ask, if it's okay, on your screen you will have a chat bubble. Depending on what browser you have, you should have a little red dot against it, and we will ask if everyone can ask any questions in that sort of chat. And if you could save those questions up until kind of after James Evans has spoken, so that second part, and then we'll try and get through as many of those questions as possible to, again, deliver as much content to you guys as possible. So final point, I will say, there's going to be so much in here tonight, but a really great part of the Future Farmer Resilience Fund, which is helping us put this webinar on for you, is that you can access free one-to-one consultancy from us guys. So if you'd be interested in that after this evening, we will share an email on the last slide of the deck. And what that will mean is, you can get in contact with us to apply for or to access that free farm business consultancy. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. There's going to be heaps in there. So yeah, make sure you get your questions in at the end as well. But we look forward to talking to you. Thanks, James.
That's great. Thank you, Josh, and welcome and evening to everybody on the call tonight. It's great to have as many on as we've got already. I think in terms of what I've got to do is a fairly lengthy presentation. So when Tom Turner puts that presentation up, we'll crack on with the event. Like Josh was saying, we will be able to share these slides with you after the event. So if I rattle through a bit quick, you will be able to have a copy of them after the event. Now, one of the things that I saw on Twitter, having advertised this event, was a comment that said, I hope the three senior panel members are all members of the Magic Circle. I'm sure that we are not, and we're not here to provide a multitude of wave wanding, because it's really about change. The whole of the agricultural transition is about change, and it's grasping change. I know there's a lot going on politics wise. I know there's trade deals going on, but we have to stay positive through all of that. And we have to look at our own businesses and make them future fit. So without further ado, we'll rattle on through this presentation, which is really just going to inform you all in terms of what's going on within DEFRA, and announcements are coming out continually. So keeping up to date with that is a challenge, but it's something that you just need to keep doing. So Tom, if you just stroke through that first slide, please. Yeah, so we're really going to talk about what we're going to do as ADAS as part of the Future Farm Resilience Fund, and we're also going to talk about the Future Farming Countryside programme and provide you with an update as far as we are up to date today. There's some other news coming out later this month and into November, and then we're going to talk about what options are out there. And as Josh was saying, we'll have a panel Q&A after the presentation. So next slide, Tom. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the aims of FFRF, which is probably how I'll refer to it because it's a big mouthful if we don't. And I know there's lots of acronyms out there at the moment, but it is about being clear about the agricultural transition because there's so much going on. DEFRA do realise this, and that's what this programme is about. So it's being clear and feeling supported, because I think in the past DEFRA have been quite difficult to access. I think they would admit that as well, but there is a different level of engagement. I've felt it over the last 12 months, and I do think DEFRA do want to be there to ask questions, but this programme is about feeling supported, but also to feel confident to be able to make decisions. And then it's not just about making decisions, it's about following them through. And James Evans later on will talk about just what he's done in terms of making decisions and following through on them. But it's about being encouraged and enabled to become more resilient, competitive, innovative and productive. Because at the moment, we're all seeing a huge amount of challenge to the agricultural sector. But where there's challenge, there's also opportunity. And I think it's really important that businesses grasp that opportunity and try to reshape their business for the future. Tom, next slide, please. So in terms of FFRF and developing resilience, this slide just sort of, and I know it's a little bit out of date in terms of the data, but it's still absolutely relevant to today. And when we look at the different sectors and how BPS is affected in terms of profitability on those farms, the columns across to the right, pigs, poultry and horticulture, obviously a really small amount of their profitability is BPS. So they have already become resilient, mainly because BPS has been linked to land. And so a lot of these are intensive industries with very little land, so they haven't had access to subsidy. But those farms more towards the left are very much land-based industries. And as you can see, LFA grazing livestock, lowland grazing livestock and mixed farms are really very heavily dependent on subsidy through BPS, to the tune of upwards of 90%, and in the case of the mixed farm, over 100% of profitability. And then, across the whole sector, it's sort of 62% of profitability on all farm types. And when you then move that down into the tenanted farm section, of which 37% of land in England is tenanted, 83% of profit is BPS on those farms. So that's just setting the scene in terms of just how big, as if we didn't already know, how big the removal of BPS over the next 7 years is going to be for the industry. Okay, Tom, next slide. So what will FFRF do in terms of ADAS? So it's really about what we're doing tonight. So it's building awareness of what's going on in terms of the future farming and countryside programme and what it means to your businesses. So tonight is about giving you a brief update of what's going on. But the second part, and one that I would really, really encourage you to do, and even if it's not with ADAS, and that's fine, but to actually sign up to some of these one-to-ones that are available. ADAS have got this service available to you, and you can sign up tonight if you want. But I just would encourage every farmer to do that, because it doesn't matter what you're doing as a business, a different set of eyes onto that business is always a good thing. It gives you a little bit of if you're doing things right, it gives you a satisfaction that, yeah, I'm doing everything I can. But if there's things that you haven't seen, and very often the navel gazing is something that farmers tend not to do much of, But I think it's that opportunity to just have a different set of eyes, and it's absolutely free. So it's a few hours of your time, but a lot of advice for nothing. And then the third interaction that we will be doing as ADAS are some workshops for participants to collaborate and actually learn. So the sort of things that we'll be doing, and this will be from January onwards, are sessions on cloud accounting and business planning and benchmarking. But largely this will be driven, this is what we expect will be the themes for the workshop, but it's driven really by what people what the outcomes of these one-to-one sessions are, because obviously if there are themes coming through in action plans produced by the reports that the one-to-ones inform, then we'll put sessions on that are relevant to those particular sessions and those sections. Next slide, Tom. Yeah, so there was an email there to get in contact. You'll see that again later on. So in terms of BPS reductions, and this has been out there now since last November. So in general, we'll see BPS reduce by 50% by 2024. And for those recipients of more than 150,000, it'll be a 70% reduction. So it'll run faster for those recipients with larger BPS. But I think the other point that's really important is that money will be redirected to new schemes, of which the FFRF is one of those schemes. And then obviously there will be a complete phasing out of BPS from 2025 through to 2027, which will be the last year of BPS. So 2028 is where we're aiming for with this work really, and the complete removal of land-based subsidies. Next slide, Josh. Tom, sorry. So like we say, this is about recycling the cash. So that money that is removed from BPS over the next 4 years, and the government have made a commitment to provide this funding back into agriculture. So basically recycling the cash, and it as that infographic demonstrates, as that amount reduces, the BPS reduces, there'll be an increasing spend on environmental and animal outcomes in green and improving farm prosperity in blue. So there are a lot of schemes that make up those environmental and animal outcomes. So there will be a bit of a balancing of payments in terms of how that money is spent. Obviously, environmental land management is one of the key drivers, but it really largely depends on take up and demand from these different schemes that are out there in terms of how much money gets pushed into those areas. Okay, Tom. Just going to quickly talk a little bit about D-Link payments. D-Link payments and the lump sum exit scheme we'll just cover briefly now. There was a consultation that was out through the summer that completed on the 18th of August, and we were hoping that we would get feedback from DEFRA. In fact, DEFRA did indicate that they would feed back to us that the results of those consultations by the end of October. We're now on the 26th and we haven't heard anything, and Janet Hughes last night said that it would be November before we hear. So all of what we're going to talk about now is what's proposed. It's not absolutely set in stone yet. We need to wait till November now until we know that. But D-Link payments will be introduced in 2024, and once D-Linked, the recipients will no longer need to continue farming. It's not optional, this. Lump sum exit scheme is optional. This will happen, and it's designed, the whole thing is designed to simplify the system so that money is paid across, but without unnecessarily filling in forms. And officially there's going to be no cross compliance, but I'm sure there will be some sort of control in terms of what we can and can't do on the land. But obviously there will be no need to submit a BPS claim each year. So that's from 2025 onwards. Okay, Tom. In terms of eligibility, applicants must have been farming up to the end of 2023, and I'll just re-emphasise this is what's proposed, it's not confirmed yet. And the D-link payment is based on a reference amount less the progressive reductions for that year. The reference amount will be based on one of three suggested reference periods: 2018 to 20, 2018 to 22, or 2022 only. You will be able to join Countryside Stewardship schemes despite delinking, and we'll talk about CSS in a minute. Tom? So the lump sum exit scheme, which did originally attract quite some interest. Not quite sure just how many people will be interested in this, but what's going on in agricultural transition is revolutionary, and maybe it will provide the opportunity for farmers to retire and take a lump sum. It would be nice to think that young farmers could take up that slack. In reality, I suspect that will be other farmers expanding, but there will be a young entrant scheme coming out, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. So this is support for those who wish to leave the industry, but like I said before, you know, we're going to have a confirmation of the rules coming up. The really difficult thing I think here is that it's a one-off window of application, and it's going, and what they're saying in the proposal was it's going to be in the first half of 2022. If we don't hear anything until the end of November, we'll only have a few months to decide if it's right for those farmers who wish to retire. So it's a very small window to actually think about something that takes generations sometimes to decide in terms of succession and whether farmers want to retire or not. It's not something a decision you make, you know, in the blink of an eye, because there's all sorts of tax implications. There's all sorts of decisions to be made as to passing land on to the next generation, etc., etc. So there's a lot to be thought about within that whole scheme. Tom, next slide. In terms of calculating that lump sum, it's going to be based on the average of 3 BPS years, those that are there, 18, 19 and 20, and then a calculation of 2.3 times the reference amount. Again, this is proposed, not confirmed, and it's based on what the BPS would be if claimed from 2022 to 27 at a discount of about 3.5%, which is sort of inflation. So you won't get what you would get if you were claiming it every year effectively. And the big if there, and the big cap, is that there's a cap of 100,000. So basically anybody with over 180 hectares or a reference sum of in excess of 42,500, it's going to be less likely and less attractive for those bigger farming businesses. Tom? In terms of the incoming farmers, whoever this would be, obviously there would be no entitlements attached to that land because they're removed once the farmer has exited. So there would be no entitlements on that land. There would be possibility to claim off the National Reserve, although that's likely to complete in 2022. There will be no National Reserve after 2022. Otherwise, it's leasing entitlements, or just farming it without the subsidy from the word go. Also, there's potential for people to find loopholes, but they're obviously onto that, and so no artificial changes to businesses in order to maximise payments. Like I said before, there is a new entrant scheme planned for 2022, but that's going to go out to consultation before launch next year. Tom? We just talked briefly about stewardship, and obviously from 2021 that's no longer EU funded, it's DEFRA funded, so there are more options available, and we are seeing a lot more stewardship applications. I think in the region of 1,000 additional stewardship applications have gone through this year. And it's going to from next year, it will run alongside Sustainable Farming Incentive, which is the first component of environmental land management. The final application window for CSS will be in 2023 for agreements starting on the 1st of January 2024. So still plenty of time to get involved in stewardship if that is what you want to do. Tom, next slide. So yeah, just touching on environmental land management. This is a scheme with three components, they're now called, because we can't have tiers since COVID. Tiers have gone out the window. And we now talk about ELM instead of ELMS, which is a tree. And so DEFRA are very passionate about the acronym rather than the word. So component one is Sustainable Farming Incentive, and there's a pilot running this year and will be available next year for entry for everybody. And at the moment, that is a sort of very broad spec scheme. And we've got another slide on that in a minute, but basically any farmer who's applying for BPS can apply to the SFI. The second component is a little bit more limited in terms of the fact that it's local nature recovery, so it's locally targeted environmental goals and a collaboration of farmers usually putting an application together, and possibly something that's targeting a species of plant or wildlife in a particular area, and groups of farmers in that area putting a joint application together. And then the third component is landscape recovery, which is more landscape and ecosystem based in terms of recovery and long-term projects. So things like restoring peatland, looking at floodplains, so large tracts of land, and probably looking at larger landowners, National Trust and these sort of people will be the ones that benefit there. In terms of component one, and to a certain extent component two, although DEFRA would like it to be very much about payment for results and output driven, essentially what we've seen already with SFI is that it will be based on income foregone, as were all the other environmental schemes before it. But time will tell. And actually, there was something came out today from DEFRA that they were looking at different payment mechanisms and more commercially focused. So reverse auctions and those sort of different payment methods where the farmer actually bids in reverse for options on his land. Tom, next slide. So yeah, SFI pilot is running this year with 938 farmers. I think they actually had 2,000 applications, but it ended out with 938 farmers. Still a fairly good uptake, and DEFRA got very pleased with how many people got getting involved with the pilot. And the pilot is based on 8 standards at 3 levels, so introductory, intermediate, and advanced, with payment dependent on the levels. And those are the 8 standards. Again, this is something you can look at a later date. And Tom, if you just move on to the next slide, just got an example here. Yeah, so rollout in 2022. And an example for an arable farm would be arable and horticultural soils per hectare. So introductory at £26, intermediate 41, and advanced at 60. And there's some examples there of what the 3 different levels and what standards you'd have to comply with to get that cash, if you like. And as you can see, they're not huge amounts, but again, this is very much pilot based at the moment. So they're very keen, DEFRA are, in terms of what input they get from farmers. So they are there to listen. Next slide, Tom. Like we said, local nature recovery is more based on local environmental priorities and very much collaboration based. That's not likely to be launched until 2024, with a pilot carried out next year. And as we said, the sort of landscape recovery is more for longer term projects and wider areas, large scale woodland creation. 10 pilots will be running in 2022 and launch 2024. Next slide, Tom. So just going to run through some of the other schemes that are out there. Farming in the protected landscapes is based really in national parks, AONBs, and really it's looking at a more focused approach for those authorities, those administrations, and based on the very much local priorities. So just go back there, yeah, Jet. So that is something that is available now from July 2021, and you need to get in touch with your local LEP to be involved with that scheme. Next one, Tom. Woodland creation, again, a lot of talk about large tracts of lands being taken over and woodland planted on it, A, for the carbon, but also B, to generate an income. And there is a woodland creation offer out there at the moment that is paying 100% for establishment and 10-year maintenance, and as we said, an opportunity to sell carbon generated through the Woodland Carbon Code. Next slide, Tom. As you can see, there are a lot of schemes out there. So there's a tree health scheme looking at felling and treatment of diseased trees in certain situations, and there's a pilot running on that at the moment with a hopeful launch for 2024. And there's also, for the livestock guys on the call, an animal health and welfare pathway, which will be driven by payments for results. So basically producing a standard of livestock health and welfare over and above what would normally be the red tractor standard. That's starting already in terms of the SFI with a vet health plan funding, and looking at anywhere between £269 and £775 per farm, which would pay for a health review for the animals on that farm through a veterinary practice. Open in 2022, and there will be capital grants to follow on this as well. And then there's the launch of the Livestock Information Programme, which will roll out over the next 2 years, which is all about a revamp of BCMS, just to prove provenance of animals and traceability. Next one, Tom. The Slurry investment scheme, again, with the Clean Air Act and trying to reduce ammonia emissions, there is going to be a slurry investment scheme. But again, because of the limited funding in the first few years, it's expected that will be focused on areas where there's high water priority first and foremost in those areas, and then potentially rolled out to other farmers. But it's basically helping farmers to engage with the whole ammonia emission reduction debate. Next one, Tom. Probably, yes. So the new entrant support scheme we talked about, that's, like I said before, is going to be rolled out in 2022, but subject to consultation before that happens. We've got a couple of grant schemes here as well, which are based targeted towards new technology and equipment rather than necessarily linked to land or environmental. These are about driving innovation and new technologies. So there's the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund, which is very similar to the old capital grant scheme, Countryside Productivity Capital Grant, Small Grant Scheme, and the Farming Transformation Fund for larger capital items, more like what was the old Leader Fund programme. I think there's another bit of information on that slide, Tom, if you just click again. Yeah, so we're looking at farmers and agricultural forestry contractors with that Farming Equipment Technology Fund. In the past, contractors have been ineligible to apply for that, and they haven't had foresters in there either, so those products will all be available. They're saying that should be available in autumn 2021, but we're getting quite close to winter 2021 now. We've not heard anything, so watch this space. Next slide, Tom. And then there's other schemes. So the Farming Innovation Programme was launched on the 20th of October. And there are 4 opportunities to get involved with innovation, and where a farmer has got a good idea and wants to, first of all, look at research into that project, and then drive forward in terms of feasibility projects, and then small R&D and large R&D partnership projects. So basically, if you've got an idea and you want to develop it, there's a fund there for you to be able to do that. I suggest that if you do, you partner with somebody within industry as well, so that you can make that idea come to life and bring it to a commercial reality. So that's really what the Farming Innovation Programme is about. Next slide, Tom. I have 31 minutes and I think I've just about got through it. We'll leave that slide up because if you want to get involved in terms of one-to-one sessions in particular, that's the email address to get in touch with, or call the number or visit the ADAS website. Josh, I've just about got through on time, so over to you. I'm sorry, everybody, it was very, very rushed, but there's a lot to talk about. And again, I would just encourage everyone to just take a slice of the advice that's out there. And at the end of the day, this is your money that would have been coming to you in BPS. So take advantage of it whilst you can. Josh.
Really good. Thank you so much, James. And yeah, you did very well to get it in under the 30-minute time bracket we gave you. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. And for everyone else listening, yeah, there's heaps of information there, and I can't, echo what James said enough about accessing that free one-to-one advice. So thank you very much for the presentation. Lots of information in there, and we will get on to the next exciting instalment of this evening, which is a good conversation with James Evans, who is probably putting into a lot of this sort of stuff, a lot of change into his business, or has already adapted a lot of change into his business. So James, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really good to have you on board, and it would be really good to ask you a few questions. So just been really great to hear a little bit about your farm, what it was before and what it is now, and the reasons why you've sort of made those changes, if that's all right, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay, good evening, everybody. Yeah, a little bit about what I farm, really. I farm in Southwest Shropshire. I've got 2 contract farming agreements, just over 2,500 acres. Predominantly beef and sheep, small amount of arable land. We're kind of nestled in the Shropshire Hills, and we've got a varied land type, really, from open moorland to lowland, going down to 400 feet. So we go from probably almost 1,500 feet to 400 feet. So we've got a huge range of land. We're mainly farming stabilised and suckler cows and finishing those grass fed, and we run about 1,000 ewes as well.
Awesome, that's really good. And so, what was it before? So you I think I've read a bit about your stabilised and stuff like that. But what was it before you sort of adapted to this sort of This
I mean, I would say I was a stereotypical, conventional farmer. We were just trying to do what we did conventionally. We were doing the same system, really. And then on my farm, we had new owners, and it was great. They took on the contract farm agreement as it was, and then within about 18 months of taking it on, they decided they wanted to go organic, and it was a bit of shock horror, because I was as far from organic farming, or an organic mindset, should I say, as what you could get. I was maximising production, looking at everything, tweaking everything, and yeah, organics wasn't really in my remit at all. And actually, so I took the opinion, well, if I didn't embrace it, someone else would. So I looked into it and realised that actually it probably changed my whole mindset of the way I farm, the way I think as well. It sounds a bit of a cliche and it sounds quite evangelical, but I literally think that I have seen a bit of a light now, and realised that probably I was caught in a trap of of modern agriculture, of trying to maximize everything, just spending more money to try and maximize yield, maximize profit, and realizing that probably that wasn't the way forward. And even in our sort of organic transition, the figures didn't look great, but what we've realized within our business is that because we've stopped buying everything in and stopped sort of complying with the modern agricultural way, we're actually far better off, because only stuff leaves our farm drive now, not a huge amount of fertilizer, chemicals, feed coming in. So it's been, I'd love to say I had it all planned out to a T, but it's like most things, it's happened by accident, and when we were still learning now as well.
That's awesome. Really, really good. And so with all that sort of in mind, how have the changes that you've made allowed your business to become more resilient, and sort of that, I guess, I hate the cliche word, the resilience and the sustainable word, but that's really what we're striving for, isn't it? So how have those changes that you've made allowed you to sort of, adapt that business for the future?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that's made our business more resilient is being so less reliant on outside inputs. I can sound very smug now being an organic farmer, not really worried about fertilizer prices or chemical prices. But that's a great example. So we took the option that we would produce all our feed on farm, obviously being organic, not buy any fertilizer or chemicals in. So literally we've reduced our bills to an absolute minimum now, because we're not buying any feed in. Everything is produced on farm, grass fed. It's made us far more resilient, and I think probably looking at it, in a good year where you're selling for good prices, you don't tend to worry about the prices of fertilizer and your outputs. But actually, when money's a bit tight, it's the bills that need paying that make our businesses, you feel the squeeze a little bit more. And we're working on worst case scenario, and we're looking at markets as well now, that we're not reliant on selling to supermarkets. And I think this has made me realize that in the past I was a farmer just selling commodities, and the beef and sheep that we sell now, and the beef and lamb that we sell off our farm now, is a far more of a bespoke product. And off the back of the environmental credentials, we're selling it to niche markets and are getting a price that we would never have thought would be achievable a few years ago.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really good insight for all of us. And I guess sort of, because there's going to be different sort of farmers on here. Obviously, we're talking about beef and sheep with you, but there's going to be arable farmers, maybe horticulturists and everything like that on this call. It would be really great to understand sort of, you've adapted your business from A to B. What were the biggest challenges, and how do you kind of get ready for those changes, if we're talking about sort of a bit more of a general sort of view for you to change that business?
I mean, to be honest, the biggest challenge was me and my mindset. And I think as farmers, we're so judged on output, and no one looks at our bank accounts today. No one sees what we're earning. We're all great farmers down the pub. Everyone's getting 4 ton of wheat. Everyone's trying to top the market, but no one actually sees what anyone's making. We're not limited companies, so no one actually checks our performance. So as farmers, we're always judged on outward show, really. And and I think, I don't know whether it's turning middle-aged or what, or becoming sort of not really caring what people think, but I generally think that kind of jumping out the mainstream agricultural mindset was, let's do something different. Let's not be afraid to make mistakes. Let's do something different. And I'm still making lots of mistakes, probably far more than what I should be. But actually, don't be afraid of it, because there are lots of different ways of doing things. And I look now, I was caught in a trap of probably just all the information that I was ever given from agronomists, from feed companies, from people selling me fertilizer. They're the same people that I know everyone's got to make a living, but they're the people that are taking money out of farmers' pockets. And I worry that, a lot of the stuff that James has been talking about really is, whether that money that we're all these grants, all these things, whether that money is being returned back into a farmer's pockets. There's always been a huge amount of money in agriculture, but it hasn't actually landed in farmers' bank accounts, and that's what I'm worried about going forward, really.
Yeah, you're so right, so right. And I always, this part of the evening I thought would give us such great insight. So again, thank you. And I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to open the floor up for the question and A, because we've got Richard Wordsworth ready and ripping into some questions, or ready to rip into some questions as well. So sorry, 2 last questions, James. Where do you see, with sort of what we spoke about with James Dunn, where do you see the opportunities sort of moving forward again for general agriculture?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a little bit different in the way I farm with beef and sheep, but I see, the environment is a huge, focus for us. If we can learn to farm with the environment at our core, focus on soil health. I know it's a cliche, and there's plenty of farmers who will say, oh, you've turned into a hippie overnight, James, and things like that. But I genuinely believe, even from a marketing point of view, even if you're cynical, the general public want to buy food that's produced ethically and sustainably. And we can still, if we can embrace modern farming techniques and still retain a high yield, maybe not the highest yield, try and get that out of our mindset, that it's not necessarily the highest yields that make the most money, but if we can get a good level of output that's working in harmony with the environment, it ticks all boxes. It means that as farmers we can access as many environmental payments as we can. I think we're in a really good place, but I think we've got to be open to change. We can't keep doing what we've always done and just expect the same results.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that kind of goes back onto that bit where you're talking about, where it's not about chasing those high yields. It's about understanding probably your cost of production and also that impact on the environment, but also, what actually turns you a profit. It's not just chucking as much fertilizer at it as you can to get the biggest yield. It's about understanding that cost of production. So last question. Thank you very much. So what would be the 3 sort of key bits of advice you'd pass on to farmers if they were sort of looking to change their business, please?
Oh God! Well, I don't feel that well advised to advise the other farmers, because I'm still learning this game myself. And I think that's the benefit of being a farmer. You're still classed as fairly young, even at 45. So that's one of the benefits. But yeah, I think don't be frightened of failure. If you're doing something different, and we're all so worried about being judged and what people think, and people taking the mickey if you're doing something unconventional. Don't be worried about it. But it is difficult, because everyone's got to forge their own way in doing something different. And I think there needs to be more examples. People need to be open about their mistakes as well. You read the Farmers Weekly or the Guardian, and all it is about best practice, and everyone just trying to do the best practice and these shining lights. But actually we need to perhaps be more humble and sort of highlight things that didn't work, or things like that. So yeah, that's the only thing I can think of really, is just be a bit more humble and learn from everyone else's mistakes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, James. I knew that would be such great insight for all of us. And sorry to put you on the spot there a wee bit at the end, but it's always good to hear about a farmer who's really doing it. And I think that's, everyone's probably going to benefit from listening to that bit at the end there. So thank you so much. And now, if everyone, there is a chat on sort of that chat bubble. We've got Richard Wordsworth here from the NFU, who's a basic payment advisor. So it'd be really great to get some questions in. I know that Richard was quite keen to get into that first question from Michael. What happens to Countryside Stewardship schemes if you take up the retirement package, please?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Evening, everybody. Great presentation, James, and also James E. I see Stephen's come back on this one, but the current, as James D alluded to, these are proposals. In the consultation document, it alluded to the fact that somebody exiting the industry could retain the control of an agri-environmental scheme claim, not necessarily increase it, if they obviously own the land and then rented that land out. So there is a potentially other option, and that may fit possibly where if those proposals work their way through, that somebody may have a year or 2 years left on that agreement, and they want that to run through to the end, and then obviously pass over the environmental land management to the person who may be renting the land at the point that they effectively exit out of the farm active farming element. So there is a potential there. Obviously, the normal rules would normally apply for CS agreements, that if people want to exit before the end of the agreement, then there's the risk of repaying the monies. And obviously, if land is transferred to another party, then the potential of transferring the agreement across as well.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, Michael. If you've got any follow-up ones, please add them in. And again, we've got a lot of people on the call there, so please make the most of this Q&A, you know, in that bubble there, and get your questions in. If it's okay, we'll stay with you just for another question there, Richard. What would you say are the key things to consider when thinking about the changes to domestic support over the next few years?
Great question, Josh. I think, you know, I've been sort of a little bit like James D. I've been around a number of reforms and things over the years, and the things I think this time round it is quite a large jump and change and challenge. I think the three things from my perspective, first one I think people are already doing on this call, which is actually engaging with what is happening. I think that's absolutely key. There's an awful lot out there. James has done a great job of distilling that down into 30 odd minutes, you know, to get an overview so you know what things are out there. I think that's really important. I think also, if this is the first time you've really engaged at this level, I think it's important to then keep up to date with that. You know, things will change. Again, James has alluded to things that may occur in the next couple of weeks around the Farming Investment Fund, the outcome of that consultation on delinking lump sum. You know, things will come out iteratively, and there may well be some more information by the end of November on the sustainable farming incentive for next year, the wider offer. And then I think that the final point, which comes back to probably more where James is actually also knowing where your business is. You know, James D suggests, you know, always getting somebody else to look at your business, you know, being a critical friend, looking at that business with a fresh set of eyes, because sometimes you can be a bit too close to it. And so actually you need to know where you are now to know what you're able to improve in, where you may want to go. That conversation then may go off into other areas such as diversification, you know, and taking James E's point around actually changing the whole business enterprise or the production systems that you use, because actually you might be, you know, you may not be making the margin you think you are, but until you've gone through those figures, you're not going to be sure.
Definitely. And
Richard, I think I'd add something to that. One of the things, because we were part of the pilot project for this last year, and one of the things that really came out was what Josh was alluding to earlier in terms of people understanding their cost of production and actually, you know, allocating costs. We've all got Making Tax Digital is there now, and the accounting software out there that's available for farmers to be able to allocate costs. I think, you know, the technology is there, and it's just trying to grasp that and understand what's going on within your business, you know, the navel gazing bit. But the other thing I think, Josh, in answer to the question to Richard, really was, it's about embracing change and being brave. I think sometimes, you know, James has alluded to the fact that we don't get everything right all of the time, but not trying something different is probably a bigger crime than being afraid to change, because this is a brave new world, and it's something that we've got to embrace. And like I said before, there's huge challenges out there in terms of the marketplace, but there will be massive opportunities for those people who really grasp this and do things that James is doing on his farm, and really embracing change. And I think that's really what my message for tonight would be about. Don't settle for the ordinary and embrace the change, because change should be normal. I've had a career of consultancy and worked for some fairly big corporate businesses, and change should be the norm. It's never easy. And James Evans will probably, and we're doing stuff on our farm at home, and it's never easy to embrace change, but that is really what farmers should be thinking about and trying to do.
That's awesome. Thanks, James. It's good insight as well, considering you're doing it at home as well. And yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I guess that's quite a good segue onto a question from Rich Thomas there for James Evans. When you made the transition from conventional to organic, what learning processes and/or planning did you go through, please?
Yeah, thanks for that one, Rich. Rely on Rich for that one. Yeah, no, I think probably what it taught me more than anything, as farmers, we are expected to be experts about everything we do and everything on our own farm. And I think perhaps because the whole organic transition thing wasn't my idea, it was okay for me to accept that I wasn't an expert, it wasn't my choice. So I kind of like had to throw my hands up in the air and say, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I need an outside consultant to come in and help me. And I think that's probably helped me with not just the organic transition, but probably with lots of things within my business. Really, is just accepting help, accepting that it's okay to implement something, even if you don't fully understand it yourself, because someone else does. And it sounds crazy almost to let someone steer the ship on your, on your farm, but it's impossible when you're running a pretty complex business like a farm. You're not going to understand everything, intrinsically like you think you should. So yeah, get outside help in. Paying for consultants is probably the best money I spend on the farm now. And it does seem expensive, and most consultants are extremely rich and very well paid. But no, it is money well spent. But it's I guess it's learning to spend money in a different way. Where it's fine as farmers, we're so used to just buying a new tractor and putting that on finance and everything like that. But if you say, you're spending £5,000 on a consultant, it's quite shock horror. But I think it's learning to spend money differently, smarter and better, and just accepting you can do things differently.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And I guess, I'm going to sort of plug the Future Farm Resilience Fund again here, but that first one-to-one is completely for free. And especially through ADAS, we've got some really great consultants that can come and help you. So again, please, apply for that and get amongst it, really. And that kind of answers Andrew Double's question there. So yeah, the first one is definitely for free, and from the farmers we've been delivering it to so far, it's been really beneficial. And I think James apparently will second that as well from accessing consultants. Now, what other questions do we have?
Just in reply to Andrew's question about how many one-to-ones it is you can have. This service is based on your SBI. So when you surrender your SBI to whichever consultancy company you wish to work for, largely you will have a service from them. But with the ADAS service that we've got, there are 3 interventions. So there's an event like today, there's a one-to-one, and there are workshops. But largely what DEFRA are trying to do is allocate an SBI to a consultancy company, and then the service will be offered by that consultancy company.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. And so a bit about the information on sort of like the pilot that we've run already. I know that you sort of did a bit of work with that, James. What was the sort of feedback from the farmers in regards to that, please?
I have to be a bit careful because I think one of the recipients is on the call, but it was largely very, very well received. Basically, somebody coming onto the farm and just taking a look at the accounts. So we looked sort of 3 years back in terms of accounts and looked for the profit requirement on a farm. So, and then, is this farm succeeding in generating enough profit to fulfill its profit requirement, and then applying the BPS reductions and seeing what the business looks like in 2028, and then looking at a SWOT analysis of just what options are available on your farm in terms of resources, people, infrastructure, land, animals, machinery. It's the look at the whole thing in terms of what those what through that SWOT analysis, what options are available, and then drawing up a simple 4 or 5 point action plan to deliver on to get to the next stage, because that's the first engagement, and then it's over to the farmer then to really decide what they want to do. We're here to help, as are other consultancy companies. There are other consultancy companies out there, and that's fine. But just like I said before, embracing change and getting involved with a different set of eyes, as James alluded to, is, yeah, I mean, to be honest, in terms of my history, I became a consultant because a consultant said I should be a consultant, and that was a consultant I employed. So I can't really knock the consulting game. But yeah, the reception has been, from the pilots, I think we did something like 60 or so visits last year, and the reception was all very, very positive. Brilliant.
Thanks, James. And so I've just got another question for Richard, and this is probably a little bit more sort of a technical one. Can you access the Countryside Stewardship scheme at the same time as the Sustainable Farming Incentive? So can you have kind of a couple of different things going on at the same time?
That's a good question, and that was certainly a question that challenged DEFRA and the industry earlier on in the year. So the Sustainable Farming Incentive early rollout, the version that will come out in 2022, in the first half of 2022, has got a scaled back number of standards. So the ones that James showed in his presentation, there are eight standards for the pilot. There's only 4 standards in the general rollout next year. Those are arable and grassland soils, moorland, and animal health and welfare review. They've been strategically placed standards to allow people to potentially engage with Countryside Stewardship as well, because they are standards that don't effectively overlap with the Countryside Stewardship that may already be on a farm. So, because the critical thing here is about double funding. The government will not stand for the same action being paid for via 2 different schemes. And of course, we're starting here with rolling out the Sustainable Farming Incentive when we've already got Countryside Stewardship and HLS out there on some farms. So it's about being complementary to those existing agreements. And I hope we will see somebody having an SFI standard on the same field that they may have a Countryside Stewardship capital grant, for example. And in fact, under the pilot at the moment, the capital elements under the SFI Pilot are actually the Countryside Stewardship capital grant. So the 2 will be working hand in hand. Over time, the SFI will increase the number of standards and the number of options, but equally, in 2, 3, 4 years' time, Countryside Stewardship will be starting to be wound down as being, from a point of view of being rolled out, and the domestic schemes, Countryside Stewardship, there should be an easier ability in a few years' time to potentially transport those agreements probably across into SFI or even to local nature recovery.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And now Tony Turner on the chat there has just asked one question. It kind of comes into my last question here, I think. I'll kind of open it up to anyone who wants to answer it, really. At the minute, not all the information is published and decided, because obviously we've gone through, DEFRA releasing stuff maybe now or in a few months' time. How can farmers make decisions for their business moving forward at the minute? James or Richard or James, whoever wants that one. Richard?
I think, yes. The difficulty we've got at the moment with the rollout of the schemes is we don't have all the full information, and I think it will probably still be six months, dare I say even 12 months from now, all those schemes that James has run down through, that we won't have all of the details there, which is really frustrating, because the one thing that our industry needs is time to plan, and it needs certainty that the policies that are coming out will be the policies that they can latch on to on that side. So advice is going to be needed, and also you're going to need that, those schemes are going to need to help that conversation. At the moment, they're not helping that conversation because we can't move beyond it may do this, it may do that. And I think as ADAS and others go through those perhaps those later interactions with the people there through the FFRF, I think some of those conversations may open up, whereas at the moment there's probably a bit of a challenge.
Definitely, and I can probably go on.
Sorry, can I just add something? I mean, I think DEFRA have got a little bit of a problem that they're making it quite complicated. And, as just a lay farmer trying to understand the new system, we're all as farmers trying to do our day job and realise that there is a lot of money out there to access. But it's almost like a full-time job for someone else to try and understand how to get that money. And if we're not careful, DEFRA are going to be saying that, yeah, there's still the same amount of money, the BPS isn't going to be, it's still like going to be out there. But as farmers, how we access it is a separate job in itself. So unless they make it clearer or give funding for consultants to be able to explain it better to farmers, it's not going to be accessed. There might be a lot of money left in DEFRA pots that's not utilised just because it's overcomplicated. So we've just got to be careful that it's a lot more straightforward, I think.
Definitely. Thanks,
James. Sorry, go on, James.
Yeah, I saw the question. You've probably seen it as well, Richard, from Tom Manning. How limited is the free advice, i.e. time or cost? We offer a service, Tom, which basically means if you can supply your last 3 years of trading accounts, we input them into a piece of software that generates an output. We then come out and see you on the farm. So 2 or 3 hours on the farm, understanding your business and trying to get to the bottom of whatever issues you've got on your farm. We then go away and write up a report. There's a survey, there's an entrance survey as well, in terms of what you would like to get out of this piece of work. And then we send the report back to you and give you a ring to see if there's anything in there that you disagree with or that you want to follow up on. And there will be things in the action plan for you to follow up on. But that's it's not limited to time. We do have a budget for each intervention, but largely what we as ADAS are trying to do is make a difference on farm, because I think that's the really important output from this whole project, is to make a difference on farm and to try and get farmers to embrace change.
That's awesome. I think that's a perfect point to finish on. Thank you very much for that, James. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone coming on this evening. We've had a really good audience. Thank you so much, James Evans. Thank you so much, Richard Wordsworth, for your participation in the questions and just the wisdom you've been able to share. Sorry if we put you on the spot a couple of times, but it's just great to have that information to be able to give that back to sort of everyone that signed up. So there will also be a recording of this on YouTube. But again, thank you so much, everybody. The email address is there, the telephone number's there. There's also the website you can go onto as well. So if you want to reach out and talk further, or you actually want to just sign up for the one-to-ones, please do so. It'd be really great to, like James said, to give back to farmers and really help you guys out on farm. So thank you so much. I've said thank you enough times now. James, Richard, James, have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Cheerio.
Thanks.
Cheerio.
You all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.